Anyway, so give you Zizek, and we'll have time for questions later, yeah?
In principle, yeah.
In case.
In principle, in the sense of, I quoted somewhere those wonderful from good old times, Radio Erevan Soviet jokes, like about that is it true that Rabinovich won a car at a lottery? In principle, it's true, but it wasn't a car, it was a bicycle, and he didn't win it, it was stolen from him. In this sense, in principle, I will. Okay, I wanted to include that, of course, I'm not only fully solidary with, I'm not only solidary with these protests, obviously, but first how should I put it, it will sound stupid, I'm sorry, I'm especially solidary with them because it fits what I already mentioned when I was here the last time. I mean, this area of education, this is one of the big battles today. In United States here, what is behind all this is so-called, in Europe, Bologna reform of higher education. And it's not only about fees, about paying, about money. There is a concept beneath it, which is, to put it very simply, as they like to put it, higher education should be an ivory tower. It should serve the needs of society, and the needs of society, of course, are decided by capital and the state. No? So what is beneath is a concept of higher education as producing experts. And that's their idea, to put it very simply. I remember hearing one minister from European Union, I don't know which country, who even openly put it. Their idea is this one. Let's say you have a disorder, like these demonstrations. No? What they want us is, you call up psychologists, how you contain mass violence, how you address it. You call social workers, how to, we should be like repairmen, like to fix problems, no? Or you have an ecology. But the point is precisely that, no, this is the end of thinking. This is not what we are doing. This is exactly what Kant called private use of reason, where it's subordinated to a goal. What Kant calls public use of reason means questioning the goals themselves. Like, is this a true problem? Do we perceive the problem in the right way? Where is the problem? What if the way those in power formulate the problem mystifies the problem? I mean, it's something pretty horrible that is going on here, which is also a nice argument against those who think time for high theory is over. This is a proof that those in power know that time for theory is not over, that they fear high theory. Second, I also support what delicately is referred to as the violent aspect of these protests. Why? There are two arguments, official, what I was able to discern reading the media. First, they say, all this eternal game, the majority was peaceful, blah, blah, just a minority, and so on. And please don't fall into the game of trying to save the movement, of agreeing too fast with this. And the second thing was, you could have delivered the same message without violence. Fuck them. Of course you can deliver the message, but nobody would hear the message, This is what they like, that 100 people gather and write a message, and then you don't even get the bottom note. Sorry, but that's the society where we live. You have to break some windows to get the message through. If it is like this, do it, my God, no? Point two, this minority, violent, and so on. Of course it's like this, but why should the truth be on the side of majority? And I'm not dismissing majority. I'm not playing a stupid Leninist game where, the majority are stupid. No, but, let's also not be terrorists here. Like, there has to... People are not in the bad sense opportunists, but you know what I mean. Most of the people are not ready to risk a potential street fight or whatever. And yes, you need some minority which, gives an additional, sorry for the obscenity, turn of the screw or push to things. Especially since you know from whom we should learn. how to use violence, without irony now, from the Middle East, West Bank. Now you will say, am I supporting Palestinian terror? No, I'm talking about Israeli terror and violence. To avoid a misunderstanding, I am not only not anti-Semitic, but I even think that we should be very careful here. For example, with all my sympathy for absolute sympathy, this means I will try to show it. Next June, I'm going to Jenin. They have wonderful thing there, Freedom Theater. And Jenin, you know, the first association in our mind is Jenin, the stupid fundamentalist city where they had a great battle with the Israeli army a couple of years ago. No, I was shocked meeting them in New York, this Freedom Theater. My God, these are educated people who desperately want to learn. And what fascinated me is they invited me, and my friend Udi Aloni is organizing that some very nice guys, even from the liberal establishment, will go there. Like, you know, James Seamus, to cut a long story short, the producer of Angli Films, and some other nice movies like Ice Storm and so on. And as I would put it in my terms, not only this arty shit, but also he produced some truly great movies like Hulk, Iron Man, or whatever. Okay, he will go there. He offered immediately to go there to do what? This is what I like. Not any cheap Western, we throw stones, free Palestine. No, to simply talk about cinema theory, culture, how to do it, movies, ideology, and so on. They told us so nicely, our friends there, which, if you know, because this brought me into trouble, everyone is now mad at me, I talk too much, and then there was some idiot who put this down. You can already find this, but I cannot restrain myself repeating this joke even on the web. For example, I learned from them, so that you will see that they are normal, if normal means to be obscene like me. A wonderful joke, vulgar, but I like it. I think it's progressive, about Iraqi and Americans, you know, like they told me, this is their side. It's like, why do Iraqi women don't like to fuck American soldiers? Because after they finish, they all the time talk about pulling out but never do it, and so on. It could have been worse. Why not? I'm tempted to say, why not? No? So, Israel. What happened? Again, and even further, I was already attacked for it. I have, as a European, some doubts. I may be convinced about all this boycotting Israel, sympathetic as I am to this. My only counter-argument is, you know, no matter how much you explain, we mean the state of Israel, not the Jews. In Europe, boycott anything connected with Jews has a certain historical resonance. But in spite of this, again, I want now to target very clearly the state of Israel. Are you aware what is going on there? Now, more than ever. Now, by now I mean these days, these weeks. They have now, and again, so that if there is some centrist liberal here, I will not try to sell you some Al-Qaeda news bulletin or whatever, but you just have to read carefully the mainstream media and you learn this. Now it's the season of harvesting the olives, no? And the settlers are systematically, and we are talking about thousands of the trees, burning the trees of Palestinian farmers. On the top of it, there are many physical attacks, water poisoning, burning of houses, burning of the mosques, and so on. So, what have we to learn from this? The hypocritical game the Israeli state is playing. My friend Udi Aloni drew my attention to it, how masterfully they use their Supreme Court. You know, let's say you have 20 attacks. Every 20th attack is condemned by their Supreme Court, so that they can say, you see, we are a state of law, we, and so on, but nonetheless, basically, they tolerate the bulk of activity, you know. It's this nice game of claiming we are opposed, but nonetheless they tolerate it. And even a step further, Udi Aloni convinced me in this. Don't be too angry at the poor settlers. Be angry at the Israeli state establishment which is playing games with them. These poor settlers are mostly East Europeans. They even didn't choose to live there. They were put by the state of Israel there. And now the state of Israel is manipulating them also, making them play the bad guys, you know. But what I find shocking is that, again, I'm not talking about Holocaust violence, but I'm talking about pretty real, and especially, this is important, systematic violence, which you should combine it with this, you remember, new explosion of West Bank settlements. What is crucial is look on the map. Where are these settlements? This is a deep sign. These settlements are not where you would expect them, close to existing settlements, so that then you may read it as, yes, they are preparing for the withdrawal and they just want to round up territory they will not give back. No, they are, on the contrary, dispersed all around. This, I'm sorry to tell you, you don't do this when you plan to withdraw. So it's obviously that they are playing the game of just, you know, it should drag on till the fait accompli, no? Till the West or even maybe other Arabs will accept it. And again, we should not be afraid here of all possible allies. I think that it's absolutely crucial to have all the progressive Jewish people. This is why, again, I stick, although he's sometimes as crazy as me, not like quite, but to my good friend Udi Aloni, who is doing something. And we get unexpected, relatively honest people. Like, did you read in the media? If you didn't, it's typical how they underreported it again. How is called that village? No, you will get the racist aspect of me. I don't know all those names. The village, something with B close to the wall, where they are demonstrating all the time. You know, okay, you know who was there a month or two ago demonstrating on the Palestinian side? Jimmy Carter. Yeah, I mean, okay, hypocrite, whatever, but, you know, there is a kind of honesty. Why not use this? It's typical how try to mention Jimmy Carter, the ex-president, today to the American basically establishment. He's already half an outcast, accused of whatever you want, anti-Semitism and so on and so on. Okay, so again, wouldn't you agree that we should learn this game, I claim, from the state of Israel? You know, you press it a little bit, why not? If the state is hypocritical, fuck it, we have the right to be. You do a little bit of violence, of course, not murderous violence, but what they were doing here, you smash a couple of windows, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, but these are the rules set by the way media function in our societies. You do this, then, well, I'm totally for hypocrisy here. Then, of course, you condemn it. You say, oh, it was probably the police provocation, whatever, no, and so on and so on. But my God, I'm sorry, you have to keep tension. Remember always this, those in power are always against violence. Yeah, because they are in power, you know. I mean, violence can only mean within their state, violence against them. I remember, so that you will not accuse me of being crazy leftist here, how this was in the last years of communism, when the opposition, the bad one, nationalist, brutally put it, the first free elections, the goal of our participation in elections is to throw out of power the communists. I remember the communists hypocritically said, oh, you see how obsessed they are with power, now they showed their cards, it's just about power, and so on. Here, the only maybe time in my life I was with the nationalist opposition, because my God, you know, if you have power, it's easy to say this, no? Then to condemn the other, oh, you are only interested in power, and so on and so on. Okay, but now enough of this initial outburst, whatever, no? Let's do a little bit more systematically, which is, I'm sorry if some of the things I start to hate Twitter and YouTube and so on, because, you know, like, so many of my stuff is then on YouTube, and then again and again I find myself in a situation of this terrible fear, which is, I think, often justified, that I may appear to you as a guy who, this old crazy guy telling the same jokes again and again, and then, haha, out of politeness, maybe sometimes you laugh. No. Okay, so let me do what I have to say. In China, so they say, if you really hate someone, the curse you address at him is, may you live in interesting times. Incidentally, I was in China and asked my friend Wang Kui, is this true? And he gave me a wonderful answer. He told me, yes, I read in the West about this, that we in China, not... But then, heroically, I told him, this is the dialectic of identity. I mean, sometimes it is a good strategy to adopt, to identify with the false image of you. Like, I know, being for some time there for well-known reasons, the whole Argentinian identity, at least some honest Argentinians admitted this to me, it's based on, when Argentina started to fight, 1810 against Spanish colonization, they were, to put it ironically, anachronistically, their PR people were looking for a good image of Argentina to base their identity. And the only thing they had is a couple of English travelers' travelogues, where the Englishmen invented this myth, Argentina, gaucho, romantic, and so on, and they basically adopted it. And now it's the original Argentinian foundation. So why not? Okay, the curse is this. And in our history, we know what's the joke. Interesting times are effectively the times of unrest, war, with millions of innocent bystanders suffering the consequences. And the least one can say is that today we are definitely, again, entering a new epoch of interesting times. These interesting times are so interesting not because, that would be my point, not because, something new is happening, but precisely what surprises us again and again is how the new and the old are mixed. What is really new is how the old persists, is reinvented. What do I mean by this? This famous saying, eppur si muove, and yet it moves, which I think is a very important wisdom to follow. Why? Because it's radically ambiguous. On the one hand, it can mean, and usually it is taken like that as a kind of a brutal, primitive assertion of, screw your theories, facts matter. Like, you can theorize whatever you want about the Earth, but the Earth moves around the sun, not vice versa. Because what's the legend, no? The legend is that Galileo said this after he was brought to Inquisition, and I like this detail, as it is usually with intellectuals, they even didn't have to torture him effectively. He was just taken on a tour of torturing machines. And then basically he said, yeah, I got the point. You convinced me with this evidence that the sun moves around the Earth, no? And then, okay, the big thing being that on exiting, he is supposed to murmur, eppur si muove, nonetheless, Earth around the sun. This saying in itself is interesting because it's absolutely clear today that he didn't say it, of course. The first time it is reported was, I think, around 100 years afterwards, and so on. But this brings us, this example itself, to its other meaning. It's not only eppur si muove in the sense of, but nonetheless, reality. Much more interesting for the functioning of ideology is the opposite. Is eppur si muove in the sense of, you can demonstrate with facts, with whatever, that something is not true, but eppur si muove. The fiction continues to function. Exactly, not reality. No matter what theories are, reality is what it is. It's much more interesting, this other eppur si muove, which is, no matter how much it is clear at the level of facts that it's false, eppur si muove. It continues to function. It continues to work. Like my classical example here, I will not repeat it, would have been based, on, don't be afraid, I will not tell you for probably the 15th time that chicken and Koran joke, whatever, but that would have been an example. Like, you may know that there is no God, but eppur si muove. No, you are. Or, to take, again, the example of eppur si muove from Zionists today, this is what I like about Israel. You know that it's the most atheist nation in the world. 60% of people don't believe in any God. But eppur si muove. That is to say, God doesn't exist. What's the basic reasoning of a typical atheist Zionist today? God doesn't exist, but nonetheless he gave us the land of Israel. No, Okay, that's another story. So again, this aspect I find interesting. This eppur si muove at all levels. I think that this is the true greatness of enlightenment. The first step of enlightenment is always this naive denouncing. No? Like, for example, what those naive anti-religious Darwinists are doing from Dawkins, Dennett, and so on. But then you have the problem of eppur si muove, and here their analysis is not good enough. This fact brings great disorientation into our lives. What do I mean by this disorientation? Just look, this strange, let's call it in dialectical terms, coincidences of opposites. Again, in danger of, if you follow YouTube, you may know this story, but I hope not. Again, a story from my friend Udi Aloni. This is, I think, a wonderful story. Sorry if you know it. I learned it only 2 weeks ago, but there is YouTube. I used it a week ago in New York. He told me, Udi Aloni, a wonderful thing that happened to him a decade ago. He was in a taxi in New York, close to Union Square, a couple of days after September 11th. And obviously there was a Muslim fundamentalist taxi driver, who started to convince him that September 11 is a Zionist plot, with the well-known argument that, don't you know, no Jews died, they were informed. You know the story, no? All the Jews were informed a day ago, blah, blah. Okay, Udi did whatever any normal person would have done. He told politely to the driver, sorry, I'm not taking this kind of insults, please stop the taxi, I go out. So he went out and entered Union Square, where, there are often, in the 50s, Union Square was the last communist meeting point, so there were groups there debating, and he saw a group of Orthodox Jews, one of them preaching to the others, saying what? Saying, return to the proper faith, Jews. We have now a new proof that God protects the Jewish people. And what is the proof? No Jews died on September 11th. So he was slightly perplexed, as my friend. He wanted to connect the two. Maybe they can find similar language and so on and so on. It is this type of disorientation. And I like, when I was in Berlin, when was it, half a year ago, at that second part communism conference, one of our Berlin friends proposed this nice notions of disorientation, notions which appear to clarify things, to be tool in political struggle, but effectively they introduce confusion. I mean, let's take human rights. Of course, who is not for human rights, my God, if you put it in those abstract terms, no? But nonetheless, the way this notion effectively functions, by this I mean things being done on account of reference to human rights, show that the least one can say is that it's not enough just to say human rights. Like my usual story, where are human rights in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so on and so on. So this is why maybe some of you were there. It still shocked me. Some of you were there where? This summer at that conference, how is it called, around the corner from here, where 3,000 crazy Marxists meet. Is it Left Forum or whatever? No, historical materialism, 10 people come, but the big, I mean, the big one, you know, Marxism, whatever. Okay, I was there on a round table with John Holloway and Alex Kalinikos. And how is it that Alex, maybe some of you, if you were there, remember this, didn't notice it. He evoked his dream of a future communist society. He said, I'm dreaming about the time, if I will be still here. Of course, he wasn't. I wanted to say he will not be. In which there will be no capitalism, but just museums of capitalism, displaying to public some artifacts of this irrational and inhuman social formation. But I told him, you may remember if I was there, but are you aware of the irony of this? Today you are saying this as a communist, dreaming of a future, but today there are museums of communism doing exactly what you say. I was there, for example, in Budapest, and I bought some things, which I use even today. I bought some 50 candles of Stalin had. It's wonderful. You light it and Stalin, this is anti-Stalinism in practice, and Stalin melts down. I mean, what more do you want? But what I'm saying is that in such a confused situation, now we come to a little bit more touchy things. In such a confused situation, you may think it's very important to decide to make the right strategic decision, which fights to take and how to intervene into them. For example, do you remember a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact, to be precise, October 17th, when the German Chancellor Angela Merkel declared, you know, the famous statement, this multicultural approach, saying that we simply live side by side and live happily with each other, had failed, utterly failed. Now, to shock you a little bit, worse will come very soon. I agree with her. But, of course, otherwise, what I'm doing here, I should move somewhere when they would pay me properly and so on. Of course, not in a way she meant. What I want to say is that, so that first you will not accuse me of playing right-wing populism. My God, you remember, and it brought me many hate mail. When did they publish it? About 3 weeks ago, I think, in The Guardian, that text precisely about attacking ruthlessly this new right-wing populism all around Europe. And I use very nicely, I think, that Robert Brasillach plea for rational anti-Semitism, claiming that what now even the majority accepts, it's the same, let's call it rational anti-immigrant racism. Like, you know, we love them, but precisely to prevent violence, we should do some preventive measures and so on and so on. But what do I find? It's typical. No, probably it was just a technicality. But nonetheless, I'm a little bit paranoid as a good Stalinist here. I sent them, Guardian, then a week later, part 2. And they didn't want, okay, also probably I understand this. I mean, you probably have and you should have a certain rule, like you don't publish too often one guy. But nonetheless, it's interesting how almost nobody wanted to publish my second part, which was basically in defense of the notion of light culture. You know, light culture, horrible. You will say, can smell the Nazis behind, no, burning. Like this idea that you have to have a dominant culture. But isn't this a lesson that, here is my proposal. This purely liberal notion of multiculturalism, which is each of us a particular culture and just some legal space where we can coexist with each other. This effectively doesn't work. We need more. Why be afraid of? I propose that instead of playing this liberal bourgeois game, we should say no. Yes, no, we don't play that game. We are for light culture, leading culture, but and the fight is what will this culture be, and we have to fight to impose our culture. Isn't it clear even here? If you follow in this country the debate about, you know, is there a who are your bad guys? Pakistani, I don't know who. I mean, it's interesting already how this changes, you know. This shows you perfectly the ideological, irrational, in this sense, character of anti-immigrant racism, how it changes, you know. For example, let me be critical. My own country, Slovenia, we are now entering a third phase, I claim. The first phase was in old Yugoslavia, where Albanians were the bad guys. No, dirty Albanians, they monopolized the ice cream parlors in Ljubljana. And it was always a meet like, are you eating their ice cream? Are you sure they're not putting some poison in it? This was the silent fear, you know, and of course, it was wonderful to notice the practice of everyday racism, how even my leftist friends, you know, said, I know this is a meat, but nonetheless, better don't take that ice cream, you know, like, je sais bien, mais quand même, no? So this was the first phase. The second phase were the Serbs, Milosevic, and all of a sudden, Albanians became good guys. It was incredible. In 1 year, the moment the main tension in ex-Yugoslavia was with the Serbs, Albanians, now Serbs are coming back in a way, as against Albanians, who are again perceived as annoying, but especially against Croats, no? Because we have some ridiculous minor border conflict, no? And this is the fiasco of Slovenia, entire politics, how basically both the left and the right, so-called left, accepted this even as a serious issue. And, you know, you score points at elections by claiming, you know, all this bullshit, not a feat of Slovene earth, and so on. And so I'm more and more convinced that, based on this incident, that the best definition of a nation was provided by, you know, the French historian, anthropologist Ernest Renan. He was not good politically. He was basically anti-Semitic nationalist, this kind of a positivist nationalism, which is one of the most disgusting things. You know that in the age of naturalism and positivism, you had very apparently anti-religious positivist nationalists who said, no, we are scientists, we just study national characters, we can establish objectively which nation is higher. But nonetheless, he did one thing. He provided, I'm sorry if you know it, the best definition of a nation that I know. It is, the nation is a group of people who share, A, the same lies about their past, B, the same hatred of the present neighbors, and C, the same illusions about their future. I don't know how it is with you. For us Slovenes, it definitely goes. We share lies about our past, which is, you know, if you talk with real Slovene nationalists, we are not only not the same type of Slavs as the Serbs, southern Slavs, we are not even Slavs at all, we are Etruscans. We are basically the base of civilization, Rome, before even there was Rome. So we are the true cradle of civilization there. Again, hatred of Croats now, more or less, and illusions about future, which is, if it were not for ex-communists still secretly pulling the strings, Slovenia would already have been better than Switzerland. This is the secret dream incidentally, yes, you will hear obscenities today before I go to work. We have time, no? Yeah. Especially since, you know, now you will get a little bit of racism, but progressive racism from me. You know, do you know the story? Once I was in Switzerland, and we had a debate, Marxist debate about concrete social conditions of sexual practices. That is to say, you know, in Europe, I don't know how you are here, every country is identified nation with a certain sexual practice. Like, if you say to your girl, friend or male, let's do it the Italian way. I don't know how they say in Italy. At least in my part in Germany, Italian way means anally. Like, can I do it up your blah, blah. If you say Spanish way, it means between the breasts. Now then we debated what would be the Swiss way. And I noticed a great disorientation there. They didn't know. A Swiss friend of mine said, oh, maybe you don't even need a woman, you masturbate with money and so on. I said, no, I said you don't take into account your progressive legacy, which is, you know what is Swiss Army knife? This knife where you have some 10, I said, imagine Swiss Army wife. You know, like, with one hand masturbates, with other, all that. And they graciously accepted this example of rich multicultural collaboration, you know, whatever. So again, now a much more serious thing. Don't you agree that, take here in the UK debates about immigrants and so on, the true debate is not what we say, what they are. The true debate is what kind of common space we share. Who will define the very shared space? And our attack on, I propose to go a step further. Our attack, for example, when you have those jerks who claim, you know, we need a light culture, but in this narrow nationalist sense. Like, to cut a long story short, in our societies, Judeo-Christian orientation should have a clear priority. Incidentally, I don't often agree with Habermas, but he made now a big comment on this where he nicely, I don't know if you know, he drew attention to one fact. Namely, he says, these guys, right-wing nationalists, just remember what they did to Jews 60 years ago. How dare they now? They don't have any moral right to use the term Judeo-Christian civilization after trying to get rid of Europe of Jews. But what I want to say is that the way we should fight them, it's not only, no, it's intolerant towards immigrants and so on, but to go to a step further. There is something, maybe up to a point critically, worth fighting for, like, let's call it the democratic European light culture of dialogue, blah, blah. They are the true traitors of European legacy. They don't belong into our light culture. It's not just the question of how immigrants are treated. The way we treat immigrants is the way we define what we are. You see my point? We should accept the struggle. I think it's absolutely crucial at that level. We should make a step further from this bourgeois liberal topic, we and others, how tolerant we are. The moment you put it only as tolerating differences, of course, at this level, you get into a typical liberal deadlock, because, of course, if you put it just in this level, at this level of differences, you, of course, always encounter a difference. And then you get caught into this boring liberal topic, but what if my Muslim neighbor is beating his wife? Should I, you know, all these preferred dreams of Western liberals. What I always suspect, what they would secretly, that it's kind of an inter-passive pleasure, you know. They would like to beat their wives, but they are too shitty. Now I am consciously playing with male chauvinist cliches. They are too weak cowards, so they at least can imagine another one. Whatever. So, seriously, what I'm saying is that, of course, at this level, you always can say, okay, do we make a compromise? How much we tolerate? No, the only way to get out of this liberal deadlock, how much, then of course there is a limit. But this is not all. The way to overcome this limit, it's not to be, in this sense, totally tolerant. And then what will you say? Oh, even if they are raping their daughters, which they are not, or whatever, I will say nothing on behalf of cultural tolerance or whatever. This is a pseudo topic. The way to do it is to establish a positive shared field of struggle. It's difficult, but it can be done. Let me give you an example again from, I hate him, but this is in a friendly way. Udi Aloni, he told me that he went to that same B city, I don't know what's name, on the West Bank. He did something which was limited, but he told me he started to cry there. It was a wonder. He organized some Jewish from Israel, from Tel Aviv, lesbians with their crazy dressing, blah, blah. No, I'm not a racist here. You will see why I mentioned this. To go there to defend Palestinians. And he told me something incredible happened. There were these fundamentalists, if you want, half-covered Muslim women who first look upon these Jewish lesbians as a kind of a freaks, you know. My God, when they were shot together, I mean, part of the same group, shot by this, how do you call them, the rubber bullets used by Israeli army, all of a sudden one started to protect the other, and something wonderful happened, a kind of a solidarity in struggle where simply a new respect was developed. It was incredible how quickly one fight with Israeli soldiers was enough in practice to convince these women that maybe there is. This is the way to fight it, not these endless games. This at least seems to me crucial. So to go even a step further, recently some friends of mine drew my attention to the fact that there is a big polemic against me on some websites, even two. One is Marxist-Leninist something. To cut a long story short, decrying me as, I'm not kidding, go there, as extremely violent Slovene racist nationalist who advocates the expulsion of Romas, gypsies, and again, they approached me already for that I always Roma and then explain, I mean gypsies as if. And okay, there was their main, apart from this being a sheer madness, this attack, in what sense? In the sense that, my God, do we live in the same space? Let them go to Slovenia and to see how the right-wing, now even mainstream media treat me as an extremely anti-nationalist extremist. I'm attacked more or less continuous on this behalf as nationalist, nihilist, and so on and so on. But I did say something where there is a lesson that they don't want to hear. And this passage, which I totally improvised, is quoted against me. Namely, there was 2 years ago, I think, a problem close to some Slovene town. There was a gypsy camp, however you call it, extended family, and local people there started to demonstrate against them, move them, and so on. What shocked me is the following, and I still fully stand by it. What shocked me was neither of these two, neither the local anti-immigrant racist nor the Roma, but the reaction of the large majority of liberal intelligentsia, who of course were full of rage against those fascists there. But of course, and here I'm not bluffing, when they're saying that, oh, lie, no, I checked it up. I tried to do something not to, my God, not to protect or justify them, but I tried to do something which one always has to do. I tried, imagine, to put myself into the skin of those local people there. Were they anti-immigrants? Yes. But, here comes the but, which is not from the right-wing media, but I was lucky that the babysitter whom I hired to take care of my small monster son, and with whom I have good relations, much more than just paying her, she also worked a long time as a, how do you call it, social worker, precisely with those gypsies, Roma. And incidentally, they themselves slightly prefer to be called gypsies, you know. So fuck it when you tell me this, that you use the term Roma. No, it's the same as, you know, African Americans, no? But what they, at least some of them, she told me is this, that, of course, don't idealize them. At a certain level, it is true. They are living there in a camp which has no legal status. Their main income is trading stolen cars. They definitely do, she confirmed this to me, steal from the fields around, and so on and so on. So instead of doing something, by bringing them together with local people, and at least in a certain modest liberal way, try to organize, you know, bring them together. You can do some stupid cultural meeting, blah, you know, just bring them together so that each discovers the humanity of the others, and so on and so on. Because no liberals did anything of that. And then, of course, you got caught into this cycle of violence. So then something ingenious happened in Slovenia. A friend of mine proposed in a Slovene journal something wonderful. In the south of Ljubljana, there is a kind of a called Murgle, upper scale part of the city with small villas, which is one of the rich people's housings. Close to it, south of it, between this rich part section and some small mountain, there is a big green empty, how do you call it, grass, just grass field, just grass. And the idea was, why don't we give the Roma that land? No, it's totally free, no other use, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. You should have listened to the big liberal defenders at that point. You know, it's nice to defend the Roma when they are up there, far away. But everybody looked like, are you crazy? Is this a bad joke? No, why should it be a joke? Move them there. You are so tolerant with them, you can have them there. You can imagine how immediately nobody even wanted to talk. It's as if, you know, so again, the serious problem here is the following one. This is the limit of this is the limit of this liberal multiculturalism, which what I wanted to draw attention to is, and that's the tragedy of multiculturalism, how the whole space is constructed with a clear class dimension. It's always upper middle class, or at least middle class, who is blaming the pure redneck ordinary guys for being racist to enjoy their privilege up there. And nobody, the moment I mention this class aspect, which is clearly here, I become a proto-fascist right-winger or whatever. No, I mean, the problem when we fight racism is it's the same as the Israeli settlers, you know. See the whole picture, identify the real culprits. Don't focus on the poor, confused guys there, whom I understand. It's so easy for an upper-class liberal living in the rich part not to see. I'm not saying, I repeat it for the third time, I'm not saying they are not right. I'm not saying they are not guilty also, in a way. But imagine a typical modest guy from that village. His son comes often beaten, not too often, but there is this fear, occasional fights with Roma children, things are stolen from the field, and so on and so on. There even was a murder in that gypsy settlement. And what was offered to these people? Nothing, just culpabilizing them. And this is why then we get where we are, which is the greatest tragedy in all of Europe today. That, did you notice how this is the story from Eastern Europe to the best of Europe, Scandinavian countries? This new rise of anti-immigrant politics with an especially strong base among the poor and the working class. This is absolutely crucial first task, I think, to break this alliance between, again, anti-immigrant nationalism and the local. Because this is the classical constellation then, we know it. You make a conflict between lower classes, between home native, let's call them workers, and immigrants, and who is the true culprit? Those up who stay out of the. This is what I wanted to do. As for the gypsies, you can imagine with my dirty taste, I learned from their wonderful jokes, which even I use now often to make a point of this Hegelian temporality, of logical temporality. You know, the same as my, don't be afraid, I will not repeat it again, Rabinovich joke. You know that I want to emigrate. A Roma friend of mine told me this one. Oh, they can be funny. They are not primitive. Really. How, it only works, but I will explain it to you in Serbo-Croat. How they make fun of them. This was from Yugoslav times. Roma, a gypsy, serves the army, and the officer wants to educate him, like these primitive gypsies and so on. So he said, I will teach you poetry. I will explain to you things about poetry. So he tells him, the Roma, I will give you an example of a rhyme. And then, unfortunately, it only works in Serbo-Croat, a rhyme, igram balalajku, jebem tvoju majku, which means, I play balalajka, I screw your mother. It rhymes, no? And the gypsy said, yeah, I got it. And I have another example. I play balalajka, I screw your wife, which also in Serbo-Croat doesn't rhyme. And then the officer says back, but you didn't get me, idiot. This is not a rhyme. And then comes the wonder. The gypsy says, nije rima ali je istina. In Serbian, like, he says, it's not a rhyme, but it's true. Which rhymes? That's the point. Which rhymes, you know? It's through this redoublement that this is Hegelian spirit, my God, among the... This is how you become friends with gypsies. Not through some multicultural bullshit, show me your culture. This is their culture, my God, no? So things are dialectical, as you can see. Okay, so... okay, you know, so... Now, this would be my first point, where we should break with liberal consensus. Accept light. We don't only need tolerance, we need a culture of tolerance shared, which is a culture of its own. We shouldn't be afraid of this. It's not just being open towards the other. We should be open towards the other in the sense of participating in the same struggle and so on and so on. So let me go a step further now. As I already emphasized, even here, the second step where we should be very careful, as it were today, is anti-capitalism. Yes, we should be anti-capitalist, and it's typically how, when I developed this line at the same conference where Kalinikos was talking about about his dream of museums of communism, capitalism, this also happened to me. When I developed this line, an old Trotskyite, who usually attacks me after these talks, also attacked me, claiming horrible bullshit, how can I claim it? What did I say? I said that we even have an overload of anti-capitalism today. But I immediately added overload of fake, legal, moralistic anti-capitalism. What do I mean by this? Open up the media, my God. Almost every day you get this factory is polluting environment, that factory is using child labor, the other one is, I don't know, that bank is involved in whatever speculations, and we have then to step in the state, that is to say taxpayer, and so on. Okay, I agree with this, but did you notice how this anti-capitalism, which I like also to call Hollywood anti-capitalism, because, you know, in Hollywood today, you can make a pretty tough anti-capitalist movies. And there must be something wrong in this anti-capitalism when you can make a big official hit with them. Like, take a movie like, I really hate the guy, I was never fascinated by the firm, John Grisham Pelican Brief. You have a corrupted capitalist who is even linked directly to the president. Like, you can openly make a movie where the corruption reaches up to the top. But what's the problem? The problem is the legal moralistic limit. It's never a question of system, it's a question of individuals who are corrupted and so on, which is why these films always end with a kind of a, how should I call it, feeling good situation, you know. The ideology is which one? It's best expressed in maybe the mother of all this Hollywood left, All the President's Men. The report, even more the movie. President is corrupted, everything. Yes, but why do you leave the movie with soft, almost crying feeling in your heart? Because the ideology is in the fundamental message, which is, but look what great country of freedom we are. 2 ordinary journalists can overthrow the president. And here, true questions began. I mean, after I saw that movie, for the first time, I became almost sympathetic to Nixon. Because I seriously think, and this is not a plot theory, I mean, it's almost accepted today by large majority that what interests me is, you know, in the same sense that I say you need a little bit of controlled violence as a push. Okay, Bernstein and Woodward did, but where did that additional push come that Nixon had to step down? I claim it's clearly that with his pro-China politics and so on, Nixon went a little bit too far for the establishment. He must have gotten, I mean, his enemies must have gotten, it's, to use the Freudian term, it's over-determination. To put it in Marxist terms, Woodward and Bernstein attack, Watergate was the directly dominant factor. But we as Marxists should be interested in the factor which was, how do they put it, determining in the last instance. And these were not them. So what I want to focus on is precisely this ethical good feeling that you get even in the utmost extreme Hollywood left. Now you will say, but okay, should we then abandon the media? Now please listen carefully, because now you will get, let's call it the moment of madness. Where do we find something more? Not in the sense of a positive program, but at least in the sense of more ruthless presentation of the actual deadlocks without any of this feeling good pacification at the end. Now I will do in the good Stalinist way a radical self-critique, because I wrote a very stupid text, I think it was published years ago in The Guardian, The Himmlers of Hollywood or something like that, criticizing 24. Self-critique, I support 24. Why? Before you think, oh, another of his crazy eccentric things, let me see. Did you watch the last two seasons, 7 and 8? Okay, I didn't all of them, but nonetheless, what I did, I discovered some very interesting features. First, already at the level of the plot, in both meanings of the term, plot as narrative and plot as Jewish plot or terrorist plot. Season 7 enacts a very simple but effective shift from external to internal enemy. You know, it starts with bombings, killing hundreds, and it's presented as a Muslim terrorist plot. Then, the whole point, the main narrative line of the series is Jack Bauer's gradual discovery that effectively those Muslims, they were not even Muslims, it was just planted onto the Muslims, but that behind it is really the attempt of a US military corporation dealing with arms and mercenaries, something like our beloved Halliburton and so on, to throw the country into panic and thus to secure for itself a key role in the government. A move admitted in the best tradition of at least the standard leftist films. So again, it's not really the external terrorist threat, it's our own military establishment. So when in the final episode of season 7, Jack Bauer thinks that he is dying of being exposed to radiation, whom does he call to his deathbed? A Muslim priest whom he earlier has mistakenly accused of helping the terrorists. And it's, I'm not saying it's mega, but it's a very effective melodrama. Like, you know, all those tough guys and ask when they came to visit Jack Bauer, but what's that guy here? And he says with simple dignity, he's my friend. Like, the only one who, okay, it's a little bit cheap, melodramatic, but it's nice. Now, but this is still, okay, Hollywood, main Hollywood left. But it goes further. What I like is how 24 renders visible in these last seasons, 7 and 8, the utmost ethical confusion of Jack Bauer's position. The priest's visit, when he thinks he is dying, provides no inner peace. Jack Bauer admits to the priest that he is not at all sure he was doing the right thing, and that all he can do is live with it, being haunted by his past deeds to the end of his days. So what is crucial is that there is no easy solution offered. No, I was doing it for the common good and so on and so on. Even less the Alan Dershowitz solution of legalizing torture. Again, I think I was totally wrong in my text where I accused 24 of playing this game of humanizing them. You know, they are doing the tough job, but look, they suffer, they're humans like us. No, there is precisely, at least in the last seasons, no game like, no humanizing. The point is not, it's a tough job, somebody has to do it, and we pay the price for it. No, Bauer's only true ally outside his own anti-terrorist unit becomes a senator who was investigating his own, Bauer's, illegal activity. And he is then killed also. And the finale of the last season leaves the central ethical issue even more unresolved. In order to save the world peace, the woman president in the series, Alison Taylor, endorses the killing of Bauer himself, but then breaks down. After informing him of her acts and giving him time to disappear, she resigns, confesses publicly her acts, and is ready to face justice. And this is what I appreciate. This ethico-political contradiction which is simply presented as unresolvable. Both poles, the president and Jack Bauer, the legal state power and its hidden obscene counterpart, had to retreat. There is no way out. There is no way to feel good morally. I really appreciate this, again, how Bauer simply said, maybe I was crazy what I was doing, I have to live with it, you know. He rejects all this attempt, no, you were doing it for the good of the country. All this humanization, which, for example, makes for me so disgusting Steven Spielberg's Munich, no? They had to do it, but look at all their traumas and so on and so on. I think that this position, again, to repeat my old story, this position I find the only honest today. This position that if we remain within the framework of the existing coordinates, there is no way out. Because, you know, for the liberals, it's easy to claim absolutely no torture. I agree, and so on. If liberals were not all too often playing this game of, you know, no torture, which means do it, but so that I don't notice it, and so on and so on. What the most you can do is just to present this total ethical confusion. No one is covered here. So this finally brings me to the issue of violence. Since I've already spoken much too long, I will simply skip over the part, some new things that I have on ecology, about the lesson of all these events, about how, when I mentioned this moralistic legal anti-capitalism, how here precisely I see also the limit of President Obama. Incidentally, I still have a certain sympathy for him, so if you ask me frankly, I don't like Tariq Ali's book Against Obama, and I share this dislike with Alain Badiou, who told me, now comes the paradox. I agree with his analysis, how, you know, Obama is not, but fuck him, what did he expect? That Obama will be a communist socialist president or what? It's fundamentally a useless book, I claim. It makes us feel good. You see, this is what I want to avoid. Ooh, a big leftist come and demonstrates Obama didn't, do the real socialist revolution or what, and so on. It's so cheap. It just confirms your feeling good. Look rather at Obama as a tragic limitation of what you can do and obviously what you cannot do. And, like, you know, I find it way too easy to do that. But nonetheless, again, the critical point of Obama for me was the way, you maybe know the story, the way he reacted to, you know, the British petroleum stuff. Remember, I already mentioned it. How he translated it directly into this moral legalistic, kick the BP, they will have to pay for it. My God, the problem is not legal moralistic of who will pay. The problem is our whole way of life. As I already said here, I think, even once, not that I want to defend BP, but it may also have happened to another company. They're probably all using the same shitty equipment and so on. So, you know, don't go onto it was accidentally that this just happened to BP. So, is it time to ask slightly more fundamental questions? Yesterday, because of the jet lag, I couldn't sleep and I watched a late night debate on I don't know which one, BBC 1, 2, on ecology, where it was a very nice debate, where it was a very nice example of class struggle in ecology between technocratic ecologists who claim, no, the problem is not social, the problem is new scientific inventions from fusion reactors and so on. That is to say, those who basically want basically to depoliticize ecology, to claim, no, don't mess when you are trying to ask systemic questions, they tell you, don't mess your stupid, outdated ideology. This can all be solved with new scientific discoveries. Of course, science can do a lot here, but not all. There are social choices, large-scale decisions to be made. So, okay, let me just briefly conclude now with another, okay, whatever, violence. You know, the first thing I think we should do is to learn to locate violence. Where is violence? What do I mean by this? It's not a question of, as I'm often accused of legitimizing violence, like now all of a sudden we should again look positively at violence. No, the first step is to recognize violence where it is. And I'm just trying, where it already is. I'm just trying to do here what was, the way I see it, the founding gesture of feminism, which was, before even you fight women for your rights, you have to discover or make it clear the very extent of your oppression. You know, the first gesture is to change your experience and the experience of others, which finds features which we now hopefully perceive as oppression of women as just part of normal life. So, in religion, for example, I will give you a very, I don't think I already used it, a very brutal example. I am terrified, I admit it, by what Chinese are doing in Tibet. But I read in a book on Tibet, published by Verso, The Struggle for Tibet, I found there, and then when I was in China, I asked my friends there, dissident friends, very sympathetic to Tibet, if this is true. And they told me, yes. Just as a tool I mentioned this just to, to dispel any illusions about Tibetan Buddhism. They told me that before 1950s, basically till 59, there was in Tibet a certain custom, which was on their narrow mountain road, if a lower class and a a lower class person and a higher class person, let's say a nobleman and a poor peasant, met, not only had the peasant to step back, but he had to do a certain gesture to signal his utter self-abasement, like I'm nobody. It's very humiliating. Basically, he has to not only to bow down, but to somehow stuck his tongue out and turn up to appear an extreme stupid idiot. Now, no way you will make me buy this as, no, you shouldn't condemn me, this is Eurocentrism, no, this is their original culture. What fuck original culture? I mean, this is brutal humiliation. We should learn to recognize violence where it is. The second aspect, animal rights. I mean, I'm not becoming a Pete Singer, don't be afraid of that. But nonetheless, I read recently this book by Derrida, and it has a nice point. Namely that to what extent our everyday life even is based on this fetishist disavowal, je sais bien, mais quand même, we know what we are doing to animals. And I don't even like those stories of laboratories because they are the exception. You know, what we are doing, not only in the laboratories, but every day. You know how chicken are grown, you know how pigs are grown. It's a nightmare. But how do we survive? Like, again, we know it, but we act as if we do not know. And Derrida has here a wonderful description in this book, This Animal That I Am, of this kind of a primordial scene when a wounded animal looks at you. And he makes a nice, almost Lacanian point that this is the primordial gaze of the other. And then he makes a wonderful stab at Levinas Derrida. How? With all his blah blah, you know, the gaze of the other's wounded face, the primordial ethical call, how Levinas explicitly excludes animals from it. And here I'm a little bit sentimental in the sense that I remember, I'm not kidding now, why shouldn't I be a little bit sentimental? I remember years ago, I saw a photo in mass media of a cat. Immediately after this cat was submitted to some rather unpleasant experiment, this experiment was under the pretext of testing how a living organism, how much pressure and hits can it endure. It's not immediately clear to me how this would help people. The cat in a centrifuge turning like crazy, and then what you got at the end was a cat with literally broken limbs. On the top of it, this was most shocking for me, most of the hair was gone, but it was still alive, the cat, and just looking into the camera. And here I would like to ask the Hegelian question. What did the cat see in us? What kind of a monster did? This is the truth, no? Not what the cat is for us, all this sentimental question, ooh, a nice cat, but what we were for the cat at that point. This monstrosity is something to think about. So again, another ignored violence. Incidentally, here, what are we, humans, for animals? What kind of monsters we are? Today, in Guardian, I read a wonderful, crazy text, and here almost I also become this kind of a right-winger, don't finance the rubbish of, but you will see why. They report seriously a guy on some big research at, I think it's Harvard. They did a big research, costed millions, on what makes people happy and unhappy. And you know what was the result? That, I mean, they spent millions to come to the result that what people makes happy most is a good sex. And what makes them unhappy is if they only fantasize, dream about it instead of doing it. I could have told them this for 1 million, for example. I would be ready. But why I'm mentioning this? Because even at this level, it's wrong. The whole point is people should act more. You know, you're happy when you have conversation with friends, when you make love, blah, blah, and think daydreaming. The motto is make love more, daydream about it less. Totally wrong. Because people, with us, the problem is that if you take away daydreaming, you no longer have sex, you have a nightmare. I mean, that's the basic point of Lacan. This is the monstrosity of the humans. This is why we can sustain so much violence and so on, because fantasy is always here. So again, to conclude, how does then violence, in what sense, here we have to recognize violence. You see, the first move should be to recognize violence not just where it is seen, but where it is already here as the condition of our daily, normal, so to speak, life. Which means that I find here a little bit problematic Alain Badiou's idea that the left, he of course refers to the catastrophic results of the 20th century, totalitarian terror and so on, that the left should renounce its obsession with violent taking over of the state power and, practice this politics of subtraction to, as it were, establish free territories outside state power simply and use violence only as a defensive measure. This sounds okay, but I think Badiou goes here one step too far in not talking at least about how, from a serious Marxist standpoint, when you don't have violence in a society, this means that you already have violence used precisely to maintain this non-violence. So I think you concede already too much to the enemy when you say we will use violence only when we are attacked. But in some sense, my God, we are always attacked. The very fact of, sorry, but this is the lesson of what old Marxists called class struggle. The very peace is already violent victory of one side. So I'm not saying we should always shoot back and so on. What I'm saying is only that we should become aware of seeing this violence, which again complicates a little bit things. We cannot get out of violence. I know we should not just use violence, but here I propose again from my friend Udi Aloni a wonderful reversal of the standard liberal wisdom, which is this happened at a conference in New York where my good friend Simon Critchley, was advocating. He said violence is sometimes necessary but never legitimate. This is the big liberal wisdom, Never it should be allowed, but maybe sometimes if there is really no other way, and then we are there. You decide when it's no other way, so... Okay. Then Udi Aloni answered him. It was wonderful, I was told. And he said, no, for the oppressed, it's exactly the opposite. Violence is always legitimate, but never necessary. You have an a priori right, because you are, by definition, in a position of the victim of violence, but it's never really necessary. You can almost always say, wait a minute, maybe it's better not to, maybe, and so on, and so on. So, what does this mean? In his intervention on the same Kalinikos forum that I already mentioned, John Holloway, just returning from Greece, mentioned as an example of practicing communism, a park, maybe you know this, coming from that evil part of Europe where you want to ruin European community by spending our money and so on. Sorry, this is how I treat my friends, Greeks, no? Lies, I know. Okay, but he mentioned, at least I hope you will agree here with me, a park which Holloway said was taken over by the demonstrators and proclaimed a liberated zone with posters announcing no entry to capitalism, like no commercialization was proclaimed, was allowed, people just freely gathered, danced, and so on and so on. Well, my reaction was, if they were intelligent, all capitalists should celebrate and even construct more such parks where people can relax and are in this way made more fit when, after a nice evening in this park, you return to your job. No? Again, our direction should not be that. This kind of a game of liberated zones fits perfectly, I think, with how power structures today. Why? I more and more suspect that this is the other side of the topic of Homo sacer. Please don't understand me. I will go to Greece and so on to support them. It's just that, as in the same way as they said for Arafat, that he never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. No? It was unfortunately all too often true. I never miss an opportunity to make a tasteless remark. Okay, no, but seriously. My point is that I claim that the other side of this obsession with Homo sacer and so on is also that the system more and more, global system today can less and less, I claim, function as a totality, not in the Hegelian, but in the simple sense of covering it all. So it more and more needs ex-territories. And it's well aware that in this way you get rid of, for example, by a great example, and I checked it again with my Latino friends, and I admitted this, but use own example of these liberated territories where you use power only to defend yourself is Chiapas, Zapatistas. Again, I made contacts with people who were there, and they told me it started good. It turned into a catastrophe, more or less, the moment they decided to play the game of just non-violent moral authority. Then now everyone loves them, of course, because they are not really a danger. So that's for me the problem. Even in this way, if you allow some excluded territories, they can be slums, they can be, if you allow islands outside brutal commodification, it makes commodification all the more efficient, and so on and so on. Another point, I hope you will agree with me here, this is my favorite example, where maybe you read it in the, I think it's no longer the last issue of London Review of Books. I did a review of a wonderful a book on Chinese Communist Party, of how, this is what really intrigued me, like, how does it function? Because this book appeared, I bought it even on an airport on my way to China. And then I tried to empirically verify it, talking to friends there, and more or less, you know, the detail that I like, I mentioned it in the essay, is how nicely it confirmed my old idea about this obscenity of power. For example, it's reported that, you know, you have one clear sign in China that you belong to the elite. It's so-called red machine. It's a limited network of 5,000 phones. If you are in, you must have one number on that network. Only top ministers, managers, whatever, have it. But then, the author of the book, and it was confirmed to me, I asked some people there also, like, what is going on this red machine? And I got the same answer in China as that guy in the book, you know. It's not what you think, the phone rings, important change of the party line. No, they told me over 80% of the talks are like, the phone rings, listen, I have a mistress in Beijing, could you arrange for an apartment for her? Listen, my daughter wants to go to study to United States, can you know. It immediately reminded me of Kafka's Castle. You remember when K, the geomet, whatever, by mistake is connected with the Castle network, and what he hears there, some obscene, moaning, hardcore, whatever, no? But what is more interesting, and this is crucial, this is, if you want, the danger, but at the same time, the challenge of our politics today. This is how we do progressive violence, where we have to invent our violence. At what level? What I learned from that book about China is the following, that I think Alain Badiou is wrong here. My best friend is slightly wrong. Where? I think. With his obsession with the formula of what was wrong with the 20th century was the party state, full identification of the party with the state, so that we have to reintroduce a new politics at a distance from the state. Sorry to tell him and you, but the whole, if you read it closely, where did he live, Alain? The whole communist and especially Maoist experience of being in power was, and this was the basic difference between their politics of communists in power and, let's call it the bourgeois democracy, was politics at a distance from the state. You know where you can get the first sign of this, and this, you should read that book. You can find references in my London Review of Books article. First, you know, whenever you have communist dignitaries visiting something or blah, 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 you know that the official term is the highest members of party and state leadership were also there. Always this order, party and state. And the position of the party here was very weird. On the one hand, it is in a true communist state, the party is always never fully integrated with the state, but always keeps a kind of, like in China. This is a wonderful discovery of this book. The guy who wrote it, was shown a wonderful document by a Chinese dissident who wanted to prosecute the Chinese party for some blah, blah, blah crimes, Tiananmen killings, and he got the answer of a lifetime from the court. They told him, we don't understand it. Whom are you prosecuting? We looked at our legal system. No organization called Communist Party exists. You know that in China, Communist Party doesn't exist as a legal entity. It's purely spectral, in the best Derridean sense. It decides everything, but at a distance. They treat themselves like, how this, in politics, in court system, etc. So this reply, I like it so much that this is my private joke with my friends. Did you see that shitty movie, Inglorious Bastards? I don't like it, but there is a wonderful line, like 10 minutes into the movie. You remember when the Nazi guy comes to the French farmer, no, and says, do you know why I'm here? And the farmer says, yes, to, collect all the Jews, blah, blah. And then the Nazi guy answers, Führer himself couldn't have put it better, no? And like when this dissident was answered, what party? Party doesn't exist. I would say Führer himself couldn't have put it better, no? Why? Because now you will say, what's the point? The point is very interesting. And incidentally, how can you see this point? Look at the Stalinist Soviet Union. Do you know that Stalin was just a general secretary of the party, and for some time, prime minister? He never was the president. Who was the president? I even don't know. I think it was Mikhail Kalinin, definitely a nobody. And even in China, you have exactly a similar mechanism. So what I want to say is that now comes the sad, tricky part. I claim that the way so-called dictatorship of the proletariat functioned was precisely through this distance towards the state. No, communists in power were never simply, we are the state. We are the shadowy power which always maintains a minimum of distance towards the state. And precisely this minimum of distance worked as this element of violence. That's the dictatorship. We have the party apparatus, but we know it doesn't stand on its own. And I'm even not just saying that this is a bad thing. I mean, I'm not celebrating it, but are you aware, and although this book and me with that book, the party is very critical of today's China, he points out that this is one of the key factors why China survived this 2008 crisis so efficiently. Because if left to their own, private banks, even the government, would have reacted the way they did in the West. Oh my God, crisis, we don't know if we will get the money back, so banks stopped giving loans, and so on and so on. There, this party which exists, but nobody knows where it exists, simply, screw democracy. They gave the order to banks. No legal order. There is no law. Party doesn't exist, but legally. But they gave the order. Even more, give credit. It worked magnificently and so on. And I want to link this to, you remember my old story, what happened in the United States after 2008. You remember, first the Congress voted against the first measure, then they de facto introduced some kind of emergency. Do you remember? All of them, official enemies, came together. Obama, McCain, Bush, and basically told the Congress, fuck up with your democracy. We don't have time for your shitty debates. Now we have to do it. And in 1 week, Congress simply voted with large majority for. In other words, the tragedy of today's democracy, the way it works, is that it's more and more in conflict with the demands of today's capitalism, where, because of this purely virtual dynamics of crisis and so on, more and more, this kind of a sudden, brutal interventions are needed, which it's very difficult to cover them. It's very, very difficult to cover them with democracy. So I think the challenge today, the true challenge, is precisely this. We have the left, contrary to what people think, this deification of state power. This is liberal bourgeois attitude. The left always was de facto defined by some kind of, at least radical left, distance towards power. And this distance has many facets. You have totalitarian distance, and which precisely is not totalitarian state. But what makes it totalitarian is that the state power never overlaps with, let's call it naively, real power. You know, there is always another in the background, and there is only one case, I think, where these two dimensions, that is to say, the true seat of power in the party and state power, did overlap. But this, I think, triumphantly demonstrates my case, because the result was that the power itself, state, became illegal with regard to itself. I'm talking, of course, about Khmer Rouge, Kampuchea, where simply, do you remember, till only after 2 years in power, they even announced who is their boss, Pol Pot. For the first 2 years, they literally treated themselves, being in power, as illegal. You just knew the name ANCA organization. If you ask, okay, but, and they had elections, but if you ask whom I was voting for, this was the last question you asked, probably, no? But I think that, now I come to my point. So we have this totalitarian distance from state power. Then we have this neo-left, John Holloway, and unfortunately, John Holloway and Alain Badiou, my good friend. At least here they come strangely together. This idea of subtraction, like literally, state is out there, we should be here just benevolently exerting pressure on it. I think that the great task today is to invent a new mode of distance towards state, which is violent in this formal sense of, but in the formal sense of not being totally constrained by state laws. But paradoxically, maybe only this violence of distance towards state can prevent real violence in the physical sense of the state itself. And we have some, I'm not saying they should be simply imitated example of this. I don't know. Take, for example, what happens today in Bolivia. I'm not idealizing it, they are deep in problems, but isn't it nonetheless the whole dialectic of Morales-Linera government that while they are the state, they maintain a certain social dynamics with grassroots movements and so on, which puts them at a certain distance towards state, without, again, involving in any violence in the sense of people disappearing or whatever. Wasn't Aristide doing the same thing and so on? I think if you ask me, this is the crucial task today, to reinvent, to find a new way of maintaining a distance towards state power, because, but again, neither the totalitarian one nor the Zapatista one. They are simply the two sides of the same. Either you control state power, then you have uncontrolled killings, or you don't, but then you are too much for me a moralistic agent, or whatever. I mean, this is, at least for me, the crucial problem. Okay, I was too long, but you are used to it, that's life. Seriously, I'm grateful for your patience.